This is a tutorial on the buyer representation and broker compensation agreement, and this new form replaced the old buyer representation agreement December of 2022. So here we are in 2023, and this is what we're using now for the buyer representation agreement, sometimes called the buyer broker agreement. Now, the agreement itself is 3 pages, and I'm scrolling through it to show you, but when you open this in your CAR Forms library, you're going to see it's part of a bundle. So I'm scrolling to the very top here, and at the very top, you'll see the disclosure regarding real estate agency relationship. And this form probably looks familiar because you'll see this bundled with the RPA. When you write an offer, you're going to see this and all these other advisories front-loaded with the RPA. Here we are, Fair Housing and Discrimination Advisory. This is the same document we see. Actually, all of these are the same documents we see with the RPA. They just bundle the same thing right here. It's kind of redundant. I don't think it was necessary to do this, but it wasn't my say. So here we are at the actual buyer representation agreement. And I think this form by nature just looks a little bit intimidating because you're presenting this form to a buyer. You've just met this buyer, or you're just starting to work with this buyer, and then you drop this in their lap and say, hey, sign this. And it's like, whoa, it's like a prenup on a first date. It's a lot of legal text. And the buyer might think, hey, I can go to other agents that won't ask this of me. So all that said, I do think this should be used as much as possible, but it can be a bit intimidating. So consider that when you deliver this document, and you might want to have a little speech about professionalism and loyalty and your commitment and something like that to soften the blow. Also, we have a proprietary form that I've created. There's another video on it, and it's less than 1 page, and it accomplishes some of this same thing to protect your time invested with the client, but it's a little bit less intimidating. All right, let's jump into it. So we have the buyer's name up here, the name of the brokerage, the broker firm here, the commencement date of this agreement. But instead of there being a definitive calendar date at the end, like you see in the listing agreement or lease agreement, instead we see a number of days after the commencement date. And I put 90 here, but you can put any number of days. You can put 120, 180, 365, whatever you want. And then we'll go down here. Now on line number 2, this just identifies if, and this is a rare scenario, but in the case that the buyer has a pre-existing relationship and obligation to another agent, that should be noted here, but that's not very common. Now, section 3 is important because this sets perimeters in terms of where this agreement's enforceable. And I wrote California here simply because it's probably the vaguest perimeter that anyone could put. I'm identifying the entire state because the more you narrow this down, the more it limits the area or the territory that you can enforce and keep and use this as a valid agreement. So I wouldn't even bother with price range. I would keep it the state if you can. I'd keep it the county as the second best choice to the state. And then if you're going to do a city or even a county, you should name a number of them. I would do all neighboring cities, all neighboring counties. I might list 4 or 5 neighboring counties. But the point I'm making here is that you want the more general the perimeters, the better, because it doesn't limit the reach of this agreement. Now, you can also check this box here and write in a property address. And let me give you a quick example. Now, I'm not going to belabor every point in this agreement. I'm giving you the straight story on how to draft this in the world of practice. This isn't just chalkboard speech about how this form works or how it's constructed. I'm telling you exactly, as someone that's been doing this for a long time, what you need to pay attention to and what we're going to skip, because we're going to be skipping most of this. So this line, you're going to use this here. If someone calls you and says, hey, I have an agent, but I want to see your listing. My agent's out of town. Can you please open it up for me? Or something to that effect. If someone's saying, I just need to see this one property, and it might be your listing, or it might be another listing that you're working with an agent on. The point is that When you come across buyers that have an existing relationship with another agent and they want to see a property, you need to list the property and say, listen, I respect your existing relationship with an agent. However, on this particular property in which I'm doing work on, I'm spending my time, I'm driving my vehicle, I'm investing resources into facilitating a showing and effectively acting as your agent, I need to be your agent on this one particular property. I don't care about your other properties with your other agent, but on this particular one that you want me to work as your agent on, because that's what they're asking when they want you to open it up. It's not that they're starting the agency relationship, and that should be noted here to protect your interest. So if you go to a showing, you can just check this box and write this here. Now, compensation to broker. Now, this is another important aspect of this form. I wrote in 2.5% because that is the most common number for cooperating broker compensation. This was a few years ago, so the numbers have probably changed a bit, but I looked at thousands of listings. I exported them from the MLS. I put them in a spreadsheet, and I saw that 2.5% was the most common cooperating broker offered compensation. So we're writing this in here that the buyer agrees to pay it. Now you might be thinking, well, why does the buyer pay it? Doesn't the listing broker pay my commission? The answer is yes, but this form's structured uniquely in this sense. And bear with me, I'm going to explain why. For now, we just need to write what we expect to get as a commission when we get this buyer in escrow. If you need to add on a flat fee like a transaction coordinator fee, you can add that on here. If it's just a flat dollar amount, you can add that on here. But for the sake of just filling out this example, write in what you expect to get out of the MLS offered commission, and then we're going to move on. Now a lot of this verbiage just kind of goes into detail about expectations and responsibilities. In this section down here, 4B, now by default, if you do nothing, it says 1, where basically it's saying you're in an open relationship with this buyer, which can be problematic, of course, right? But we're not interested in doing an open relationship with our buyers unless we have to, unless we have no other choice. We're doing number 2. We're checking this box and we're saying, no, we're the exclusive representative. This is exclusive, you and me, and I'm going to deliver as your broker, but you're working with me exclusively. Now, if you can't get that, I mean, that's the second best choice by leaving it B1 up here, but B2 is your objective. Check this box right here. Now, there's a provision in here in C about canceling, and it says that the parties can cancel, but it also gives a delayed notice if you checked this number 2 up here. So this is going to protect you a little bit further. Now, of course, you could check this box right here and just completely eliminate the cancellation. You know, quite frankly, if you feel like if you're going to do a lot of work for a buyer, check this box and let them object and then delete it if they will simply not agree to this. But why cancel early? There are provisions in here that protect you from a buyer from canceling and immediately circumventing you and going with another agent. But do you really want to get into that battle? If you can just have an ironclad loyalty agreement, this is what you want to check right here, C2. All right, now this is the very important second half of the commission equation we're talking about. Now remember up here I said that the buyer's on the hook for 2.5%. Well, down here on D it says if anyone other than the buyer compensates the broker for services covered by this agreement, that amount shall be credited toward buyer's obligation to pay compensation. What this is saying essentially is that whatever you get paid as an agent from the listing broker, that releases the buyer for that obligation. It gets credited to the buyer. So this 2.5%, if you're getting 2.5% from the listing broker, it cancels out what the buyer owes you. That's how this is structured, because this whole agreement has to have some sort of consideration involved for your efforts. But because it's anticipated that you're going to be paid from the listing broker when you write an offer, it thereby releases the buyer from the obligation of having to pay you. Now, occasionally it can come up where you might have put 2.5 or 3% up here, and then you're getting less from the listing broker. And yes, the buyer would be on the hook for the difference, for the 0.5% difference or whatever. And I've seen that come up, but often the buyer's agent doesn't care. They just waive it and they just take whatever the listing broker offers, and they don't ask the buyer to pay the difference, just because this is more of a measure of protection than you actually expecting. When these are filled out 99% of the time, no one's thinking the buyer's going to just write a check or something. I mean, in some cases that happens, but rarely. Most of the time, someone's doing this and saying, hey, just so you know, if you're on the hook for the commission if somehow you screw this up, or if I'm cut out of a deal, or there's no listing agent involved. So almost always the listing agent credits what the buyer is responsible for, and the buyer pays nothing out of pocket. Now, you'll want to write in a number of days here, and that basically says that if the buyer, after cancellation, tries to make a deal happen and your efforts were involved, then you should be compensated. And so we're putting 30 days in there after the expiration of this agreement. That's it. That's most of what this is about. The rest of this, honestly, is the answers to questions or provisions that address issues that may arise in this form. So we're filling this out. We're not going through every line here and talking about why every word in this form exists. Instead, I'm just telling you what you need to focus on if you're drafting this. Both parties are initialing each page, both parties, meaning the buyer and the broker representative, are initialing each page. If the buyer is an entity like an LLC or a trust or a corporation, they need to check this box and do an additional form, representative capacity signature disclosure. Buyer's going to sign, agent's going to sign, the form's done. But wait, there's more. So again, Carr loves bundling stuff together. So we have this transactional advisory here. Buyer signs, whatever, another advisory. My gosh, this is just so over the top. Oh my gosh. All right, you get the idea. So the form is 3 pages sandwiched between a bunch of advisories. How many pages? Making it 13 total. My gosh, 10 pages of advisories, 3 pages of the actual form, of a form that honestly should be 1 page long. Oh, all right. Well, thank you for watching. If you have any questions, please leave a comment.